So one of the things when chains get stressed, one thing that happens is it opens the door for people who have nefarious deeds in mind of adulterating product. So adulteration can be as simple as substituting in cornstarch a little bit to increase your profit. It could be as detrimental health as a complete substitution of an ingredient with something that is dangerous to a human to consume.
Did you know the average woman spends 7 years of her life dealing with period pain? Wave By believes it's time to get those years back. Founded by an OBGYN, Wave By is the first science-backed solution that regulates menstrual cycle and reduces period pain before it even starts. Wave By has 3 products. By Irregularity from Wave By is designed to help your cycle find its rhythm again. Packed with clinically studied nutrients like inositol, magnesium, and chasteberry, By Irregularity supports healthy ovulation, hormone balance, and smoother, more predictable cycles without prescription or hormones. By Cramps and By Bad Cramps are the proactive premenstrual products that target the prostaglandin messengers that cause cramps and heavy bleeding, so your life doesn't have to stop every month. Think of it as the new Midol, backed by science, built by women, and designed to keep you feeling like yourself. Join the thousands who have already said it's absolutely life-changing, including myself. I've been taking this product every day for nearly 6 months. I take By Irregularity and By Cramps, and it has absolutely reduced my cramping and regulated my cycle. It is super predictable. So head to waveby.co and use the code Lindsey Cortes for 10% off. Say bye to irregular or painful cycles and hi to your true rhythm. Because when your cycle's in sync, everything else just flows. Lindsey Cortes for 10% off your Wave By purchase. Hi, fans and listeners. It's Lindsey Elizabeth Cortes, registered dietitian, sports dietitian, your host of the podcast. We have 2 guests on today, both speaking in representation of an organization called NSF for Sport, or NSF, frankly. I'm going to read off their bios as a formal introduction. So we have Sarah Kroll. She's the Vice President of Food and Nutrition at NSF. In this role, she is responsible for NSF's Global Food and Nutrition Division, which includes primary food production, agriculture, and fisheries, food manufacturing and distribution, product claims, certifications such as organics, non-GMO, including NSF's subsidiary Quality Assurance International, and nutrition and wellness, including supplements and cosmetics. Her teams ensure the safety of global food supply chain and brand protection for the world's most recognized food and nutrition companies. Sarah's decades of expertise include leading in the strategic development of food safety programs and global operations. She joined NSF in 2006, focusing on regulatory compliance. Since then, she has been instrumental in developing NSF's food equipment, consumer products, and organic certification businesses. Most recently, she served as Senior Director, Food Supply Chain Solutions, leading global strategy for the seafood, agriculture, food processing, and packaging sectors. Sarah holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Western Michigan University. Alongside Sarah, we have John Travis, the Principal Technical Manager. He has more than 25 years of experience in analyzing dietary supplements, utilizing techniques such as gas and high-performance liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry. His expertise in the analysis of dietary supplements for ingredients prohibited by the anti-doping organizations was instrumental in developing screening methods for NSF's Certified for Sport program. These procedures help analyze and detect potentially harmful substances, contaminants, and emerging drugs in dietary supplements. He joined NSF in 1995. As new performance-enhancing drugs become available, Mr. Travis's research helps NSF identify testing methodologies to screen for these compounds and ensure that certified products contain the ingredients and quantities as labeled without banned substances or contaminants. In turn, this certification allows coaches, trainers, and athletes to make more informed choices while developing their training programs. Mr. Travis is an active contributor to several trade and peer-reviewed publications and review panels, and was a member of the Association of Official Analytical Chemists AOAC, Presidential Task Force on Dietary Supplements. John, Sarah, thank you so much for joining on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us. Boy, they really gave you the long versions.
Geez. I mean, Mr. Travis even.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think it's really important to read the whole thing because you've done so much with your careers and you've both worked with NSF for a while now. So, it's not like you've just done one thing with the company. And it's so important for people to understand what goes into food, supplement, and the safety of it. There's so much. So even just reading that, because I think this is another, a huge conversation in America today is like food, supplement, quality, safety. What are we putting in our food? And it's like, well, organizations like NSF have been doing something about this for years and years and years, right?
Yep.
So it's good to read all of that off.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think arguably, John and I would say we have some of the funnest jobs in the world. And we work with some great teams. So it's awesome being at NSF in the day-to-day.
Yeah. And I always like to just get to know each one of you individually. Sarah, we see that you had a chemistry background, but I'd love to know kind of what, landed you at your job with NSF or really that passion and care for food quality, agriculture, all these things that you're involved with. Where did that stem from for you? Or where are your current passions when it comes to food quality control?
Yeah, I think like most, people in their career, maybe this wasn't where I envisioned myself, 25 years ago. But I think as a little girl, I was always geared towards science. I always wanted to know how things worked. When I went to college, I think I thought I was going to maybe be a doctor. I got out of school and I worked in pharmaceuticals for a little bit. And that was, interesting, but maybe not I don't think I was going to be at the bench, kind of like how John is. I think he's a scientist. I think I wanted to do something a little bit different, but I came to NSF. And when I got here, I was I really fell in love. I fell in love by the different types of work that we do. It was amazing to me to work for an organization that wasn't just in pharmaceuticals or in food, but we were providing safety assurance services and expertise across food, across drinking water, across supplements, and not just in the United States, but we were touching countries all around the world. So it was a great place for me to start my career. I came here very entry level, and as the company's grown, I've just grown as well. So
yeah,
I've grown up within NSF, and it's been a great journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get into that momentarily about just all the things that NSF does. And turning this over to you, John, this, in my world as a sports dietitian, that's really how I came to know about NSF is this sector of NSF called NSF for Sport that does the supplement testing. And that's kind of your wheelhouse, the supplement testing, the research, all of that. So, again, you've been doing this for a long time, but where does your interest and passion with, whether it be food science, supplements, health, where does that stem from?
It's funny that there's some parallels between how Sarah got into her role and came to NSF and what I did. So, I always wanted to be a scientist. I knew that from an early age. So I remember taking a career day at my high school, which I grew up in rural Michigan, and it's like I wanted to be a drug development chemist that developed the next big drug. It was a Nobel laureate. As we all, when they're in high school, have these grandiose ideas.
Yes.
I mean, I never got there that way, but I think I've had an impact on the scientific community in other ways. So when I started at NSF in 95, was doing our water analyses here. And then a lady joined NSF in 99, and we had the opportunity to be approached by a big brand to develop a supplement certification program because right after the share regulations had passed, the law had passed, and they'd asked, they're having some of the same problems that some of the other industries had that NSF was able to solve. So from a lab perspective, I joke the former chief technical officer was in there asking for volunteers and everyone kind of stepped back and I was kind of goofing around, not paying attention. I was standing there, so I was the one involved. I mean, yes and no. I had an interest anyway,
Right.
And I mean, it served me well. So it was something I hadn't had experience. I mean, I was a recreational runner at the time. I took dietary supplements. So I had a lot of interest in it. And I found it fascinating in problem solving, and it fit right in with my persona.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it was something you were taking supplements, you were a runner. So these are, I think that personal interest helps a lot too. So let's dive into, because you already mentioned the DeShaw Act, Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of like 1994, was it? And this is essentially, you know, I don't know what branch of our government instated this. I don't know what level this is, but it's some sort of legal document that says that dietary supplements are not regulated by like the food and drug industry, essentially, right?
So I'll rephrase. I'll, maybe I'll correct you on that. So
Please
that
do.
was passed. That was passed by Congress. So that was a
Congress.
congressional law. So signed by the president at the time. So that was Bill Clinton. So Clinton
Mhm.
signed it into law. Yeah, if I remember that, I'm old.
I learned this in school, but I'm already forgetting. So yeah, signed by
Yeah.
Congress.
So
Okay.
so
Some
yeah,
level of the government.
it's a law. It's in the U.S. code, and so that law actually provided a legal framework and a legal category for dietary supplements. So unlike internationally, where it could be supplements or food, in the U.S., they're their own regulatory category.
It's their own
So it
thing.
established that, yeah. So and it was under the purview of FDA, and for sake of the regulations, it is regulated as a food, but there's some notable exceptions that are added within that law.
Right, right. And I think the key thing here when we talk about safety is that they are not drugs, right? So it's their own thing. We have a category for them. They're somewhat regulated as food, but it is not drugs. That's like my huge takeaway. And I think as a dietitian, that's what's important for me to pass on to consumers is, a drug goes through so much testing for safety, for side effects, for, yeah, this is precisely 5 milligrams or whatever. And the supplements are not necessarily that tightly regulated. So let's dive into this specific program first, John and Sarah, please chime in as you see fit. And then I have some other questions for you too, kind of broadening NSF, but focusing on this one aspect. So NSF does a lot of things, but this NSF for Sport, as you mentioned, is the organization that once this DeShaw Act was passed by Congress, oh, we need a way to actually ensure good quality supplements. And that's where, this project, so to speak, was brought to you, John. So how has it since then, it's been a long time since then, but how has this program grown? What sorts of things is NSF for Sport doing for the supplement industry?
Yeah, so I think that I'll talk about the certification program in general first, and there are three aspects of certification. If folks don't know, I'll go on a little manifesto about it. But it's good for folks to know what it entails. So
Yes.
there's really three parts. There's one that manufacturers must be GMP certified. So we have requirements where NSF will go in and inspect the facility against specific criteria to certify the facility that is meeting it. So from your audience perspective, think of us looking at training records, looking at cleaning procedures, looking at that do they have master batch records? Are they verifying the identity of ingredients that come in their shop before they produce it? Those are all parts of GMP.
Hmm.
So that's step one. So step two is our contents and claims. So that's NSF certified, content certified. So we're looking at what's on the labels, what's in the bottle.
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's say a product says it has 500 milligrams of vitamin C. We'll verify that. Yeah.
Yes.
Then it won't have E. coli, toxic elements below prescriptive levels that are acceptable in the industry and set
Mhm.
by our joint committee. And really, those things are we'll talk about that aspect a little bit later. And
Okay.
then finally, there's the certified for sport aspect, where we test for over 290 substances that are prohibited in sport.
Right. Yeah. Because maybe somebody who's not an athlete bound by the World Anti Doping Agency, maybe they could take something, but then there's these 290 substances that are not allowed in certain sport organizations that you test for as well.
I think there's something that was really helpful for me to understand when I joined NSF that I didn't appreciate, and that's the standards part of NSF. So a lot of people assume, oh, hey, it's we must be just a test lab or we work like a test lab. But NSF, this aspect and this concept of we develop standards and create a standard. And you mentioned you talked before about that sort of regulatory gray space that supplements fall into.
Yeah.
And that is where a standard or a program like this developed by NSF becomes so powerful because it fills that gray space with something that's very consistent and defined. And so if you have a product, whether it's a dietary supplement, whether it's a drinking water safety product, whether it's a food item, and it's certified against that consensus or consistent standard or protocol, then the consumer knows there's a consistent set of requirements that one brand to another has achieved the same level of quality or rigor to exist, to defined requirements. So that's really, I think, where the power of certification comes into play is, science-backed consistency. And that's very, very different from a brand or a manufacturer just making a self-declared claim, which is really
Right.
hard for consumers to differentiate between
Oh, yeah.
and a self-declared claim versus a certification claim backed by a standard or an independent third party like NSF.
Absolutely. And I think those standards, please correct me if I'm wrong, but those standards that you can create are first and foremost probably to make sure no harm is being done. Like, you mentioned testing like heavy metals, toxic ingredients. Like, okay, we're going to make sure that this is below a certain threshold, all of the products that have the certification, so that we're not creating harm. Could it also, because in the supplement world, there's a lot of ingredients that we just don't really have much research on. We don't really know at what amount is this effective. So is NSF doing research or creating some standards in that regard of like if there's some sort of new supplement or ingredient that we're like, what is an acceptable amount to be in a product? I'm trying to think of an example with a new ingredient, but
Yeah, we could. I could talk about that a little bit. So one thing that we do have, and we had done it as policy, but now it will be part of our contents test. So NSF 173 is the standard that governs how we assess products for contents and claims.
Mhm.
So that would be the toxic elements and the micro and the amount of vitamin C in a product, for example. So we have evaluation, what's called an upper safety limit evaluation, where if it's an ingredient we don't have experience with, which would a new ingredient would be, we look at the scientific evidence from a toxicological perspective,
Mhm.
and we evaluate those products against or that level they want to use the ingredient against those endpoints to be able to determine, hey, will this be safe for the consumer to take? So if you're looking at reproductive toxicity, genotoxicity, just to name a couple, carcinogenicity, if I say
Right.
that correctly. So those different aspects that are important to the consumer because you're taking a supplement for your health. And the last thing you want to do is have that supplement impact your health negatively.
Absolutely. And there's still I was just gonna say there's still so much on the consumer. Like you can have a bottle of something that you're saying, okay, this is below these dangerous thresholds. And yet if a consumer then overdoses on it, like that's still so possible. I've been hearing this recently with turmeric supplements of people having liver issues with too much turmeric. And it's like, man, we've been talking about the benefits of turmeric for so long, but if people are just overdoing it, they're overdoing it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, I cut you off.
No, not at all. I think you raised a great point, which is I think one of the things that makes this space so interesting for us is the innovation. And, we realize and we support that supplement companies and sports nutrition companies will continue to innovate. This is a space that evolves so rapidly. So I think that's another reason why consumers have to look for certification because standards and protocols and guidelines like the ones that NSF create will rely on science and rely on scientific evidence to at times say, yeah, this is a known harmful ingredient. And then at other times, we'll use the best available information. But going through that exercise of staying current with innovation is really important to us. And that's why we have experts convene to work together on updating standards and updating guidelines and protocols that inform and help our guidelines evolve. So that's really important to us to stay current with like the best science and stay top of mind, because this industry isn't going to slow down anytime soon. And we recognize that. And our brands that we work with, our manufacturers, our formulators are constantly challenging us and constantly challenging John's scientists in the labs and our toxicologists. But I think that's what the partnership is all about, is together to protect the consumer.
Yeah. And I like that perspective too, instead of just, thinking negatively about the whole supplement industry or demonizing them, to think of them as innovative, as, trying to push things forward, push health forward. But yeah, what's the standards that are in place to ensure safety first and foremost? That's what you guys are here for. And so going back again, John, to, like one of the first things you do is just make sure companies are following good manufacturing practices, those GMPs. Okay, if you're not doing that, then who is?
I mean, really, FDA has a responsibility within the federal regulations to perform that task.
Okay.
And I mean, we look at ourselves as not a branch of the FDA, but as a quality group. So, we can, if a brand or manufacturer has our certification, it definitely gives them a leg up in inspection by the FDA because they've gone through our rigorous program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where it is. And there's a few additional requirements that we have in there, but it's not much more than what's written in the regulations. It really helps the brands and manufacturers prepare for those FDA audits. But they prefer to call them inspections.
Yeah. And so this is like all what I've heard, because I've never worked directly with the FDA. I've never seen them completed an inspection. So but this is just kind of what's talked about by dietitians, sports dietitians, is they'll say things, and I've said things like this too, which now I'm like, why would I say something if I don't know if that's true? So I'm mad at myself for that. But we've heard things like FDA doesn't have time to inspect all these supplement companies, which I'm prone to believing that, because there's hundreds of thousands of supplement companies. Like, how could you regulate everything? Is that, part of the story as to why some independent organizations are so important?
I think that's a reality. I think that the industry has responsible players and responsible parties, and retailers play a big role in this. So there's a lot at stake here, and consumers are powerful. So I think it's, in my view, it's a whole ecosystem of parties needing to be responsible. Consumers are demanding that, and retailers are very attuned to that. Times have really changed and consumers are more informed. Retailers do not like recalls or incidents with their private label products or products that they carry. And so that accountability, I think, is much stronger throughout the supply chain, all the way down through GMPs. So I do think that we see a lot more accountability, a lot more responsibility, even absent of, okay, is there a regulatory inspector to, boots on the ground for every facility? We know that that is not pragmatic reality. But the good news is that there are organizations like NSF. We have peer organizations out there to provide that support for the brands, the manufacturers, the retailers, that know that it's the right thing to do. And it's also the right business decision, quite honestly. They want more consumers to trust their products.
And just put this out there, I wasn't bringing that up to speak negatively about the FDA. That's not my intent at all, but more because this is kind of the lingo that, as a dietitian, I was like, trained and raised on, was like, supplement companies aren't regulated, don't trust them. But I think times are changing, not just thanks to organizations like NSF, but Sarah, the point you were bringing up of like, it doesn't do a company any good to have a bad reputation. And when I started as a sports dietitian, there were a few companies that were like, I would say, popping hot all the time for banned ingredients for athletes. And it's like, they're getting a bad reputation. That's reducing sales. That's not good for them. And so that accountability on everybody in the industry to try and level up and do something good for the consumers. But I also think you brought up another good point too, that consumers drive the business too. So like think about as you're purchasing supplements, where's my money going? Is it going towards something for my health? Is it going towards something that I believe this company has me in their best interest, or am I putting money towards something that's not, right? And okay, so I have another little like angle of this to add though, because I think that times are changing where people really truly do care about health. But I did spend a few years working in with the military. And some of those men, I was working in a predominantly male population in the military at the time as well, even though I know that there's many, many amazing female warriors. And this is the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. But it was almost like these men had this different perspective that like if a supplement had a banned
Yeah.
ingredient, they wanted it. They wanted it. It was so twisted, right? Because in their mind, they were like, if it's banned, it's because it works.
I've observed that mentality before. So there's an organization called the Partnership for Clean Competition. They're a nonprofit. They're a funding body for anti-doping research here in the U.S. So it's funded by dollars from Major League Baseball, National Football League, U.S. Olympic Paralympic Committee, and U.S. Anti-Doping Organization. Yeah, I'd be remiss if there's some others that are part of that too. I mean, they all participate, but they instead of doing individual research, they pool their money to fund anti-doping research here in the U.S. and abroad as well. But it's interesting that some folks from one of the anti-doping labs got up and did a presentation exactly on this. So now, like the SOCOM service members are being tested for the prohibited substances. I don't know if you knew that or not. So they put up the diagram.
Two members of my unit that
there you go.
dismissed.
So they paralleled that, Lindsey, with elite athletes and then the SOCOM. And it was uncanny, the positives that they had. They were almost identical.
Yeah.
It was uncanny. So, I mean, one could take that, the performance aspects of an elite athlete is similar to the performance aspects and desires of the elite military number.
Yeah. Yeah. Fans, I'm pausing the conversation again to check in on you. Are you concerned that you have REDS? That's relative energy deficiency in sport. It's a syndrome of not ideal health consequences and performance consequences that all stem from the idea that you're not fueling optimally or fueling enough for your sport needs. I've become an expert in this over the years because unfortunately, a lot of female athletes struggle with this. We have research that shows sometimes up to 90% of female athletes might be suffering from at least one of the side effects of REDS. Other research says that up to 45% of female athletes are struggling with disordered eating. These are big statistical numbers, and I don't like it. I'm here to help you become fierce, fit, and fueled. So first and foremost, head to lindseycortes.com/REDS to learn more about REDS, listen to past podcast episodes, and take our free REDS quiz to see if this might be a concern for you. From there, I've got 3 ways to help you. 1, download the REDS Recovery Guide and start taking action right away. 2, join our REDS Recovery membership. For a very affordable $15 a month, you will have access to me as a sports dietitian to educate and empower you to fuel better. We meet once a week for live calls, Q&A. You have access to the recordings if you can't join live, and a community group chat to support, encourage, and motivate you along the way to fuel fiercely. Last, spots are limited for one-on-one help, but I can help you personally through one-on-one coaching, be it my Fast Track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, or perhaps Fuel School, depending on your age. All of that is on my website, lindseycortes.com. But because one-on-one spots are limited, I really want to encourage you to join the REDS Recovery membership. We live in a world where it's very easy to just pop online, read an article, listen to a podcast, and I think we do a decent job at getting information out there, but we all need someone to talk to and really ask those personal questions, and also be open and honest in a community that's going to support you in your fueling needs and goals. And that's exactly what this membership is. So only $15 a month. We meet once a week, and you will be provided with so much education and empowerment and support. I know you won't regret joining. Head to lindseycortes.com/REDS, and there you will see the REDS Recovery membership that you can join and join us this week. It's time for you to be fierce, fit, and fueled. Yeah, and I think like my angle that I usually try to with an athlete or a military member that had that mentality of like, but I want what works, and if it's illegal, then it must work. I would also say, but if there's side effects. This is not just like we're trying to not help you reach your highest performance. There's dangerous side effects. Because that was always an argument with the military too. Is like, but this is not for sport. This is life or death or whatever. But it's like, but there's other things that where this can, if you want a long, durable career, this is not the option for you. I think we've seen that too in some sports, like the bodybuilding world too, where some guys and women really jack themselves up with performance enhancing supplements. And, sometimes they believe that that's the sacrifice an athlete makes to reach their peak and get their glory, but then we've seen them crumble with some really ill health at young ages afterwards. So that's something to think about too. And I think that athletes these days are proving that the longer, more durable your career can be, the better. Oh my goodness, was it Sarah Hall at the recent marathon in California, 42 years old, came in like second place? It's like, wow, what a long career she's having, right?
Well, and I think that that trend that you're describing with elite athletes is very transferable to the day-to-day consumer and kind of the weekend warrior, the home, because the trends that we see are very much about personal longevity,
Yes.
sustained. It's, the the someone running a half marathon is now in their 50s and beyond. They're sort of this trend towards revitalization, well beyond ages that you would have thought. So the concept of clean and sustained well-being, well into kind of your later years means that we're seeing more of a demand for clean products. And so I think there'll always be, I think, a contingent that's a little bit, let's say, willing to be on the edge. By and large, we're seeing, in the consumer space, like really different preferences
Yeah.
for clean eating, clean supplements, high quality and high standards. So it's refreshing in a way. And it's a bit of a
It
different
is.
trend than we saw, 10, 15 years ago with sort of we know what the labels said. And, and that was honestly the work that his team did to kind of really move the needle on the industry at that time. It's very different landscape today, the mainstream supplements that it was, 10, 15 years ago.
It is. Yeah. Which is why it's, for me, it's so hard to keep up with all the new products coming out. And yet it's good because I think, like you said, the mission of the supplements now is different than it was 15 years ago. The quality is better now. And we're building, I think there was a long time where supplements were just kind of a scary world. It was like, don't waste your money on, expensive pee. And now it's like, no, we actually have really good ingredients that can help your health, create longevity, help you be strong, durable, feel better day to day, perform better. And so, again, coming back to this conversation, how do we know that there's standards in place? And that's what NSF is doing. I want to expand this conversation a little bit because it goes beyond supplements. And that's what I was reading off with Sarah's bio is really like you have a role in supplements, but also cosmetics, agriculture, fisheries. This is a huge NSF is a huge
Yeah.
company. So I was wondering if you could kind of just expand. We've talked about the NSF for sport mission. Like, what would you say the total NSF mission is?
It's
There's a
very,
lot of
but yeah, very simple. I mean, we're here to protect and improve human and planet health. So we touch, food and drinking water and all aspects of, essentially protecting people and helping companies make better products to serve that mission. So the food space for me has always been tremendously interesting. It's incredibly complex. And I'm sure John gets asked the same, you always get asked by your friends, oh, what's the thing I should or shouldn't eat? Or what's the thing I should or should know before I go into the restaurant or the grocery store? And really the thing I always say is look beyond what a product is claiming. Look beyond what a product is claiming in and of itself, because there's marketing and then there's what is backed by an independent certification. Organic in the United States has to be backed by an independent certification. So there's trust behind that. That's legitimized. That's going to have someone independently auditing and verifying to the national organic standards. So, be an informed consumer and know that there are many, many other claims that would not have an independent party backing them. And as a consumer, you don't have a lot of time and you want to trust what a great brand says, but you have to be a little bit guarded and ask yourself, is that some great marketing, or is that something that someone independently really verified and that I can trust?
Well, it's true. Even in like food packaging and advertisements, sometimes they just go on and on about, non-GMO, organic, soy-free, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I'm even like, is this all real? Right? Like, or are they just saying it? Or I don't know, right? Is it all marketing? So that's where you come in.
Yeah. Yeah. The resources I think are getting better, and the ways of checking are getting better. Marks are a great way to check on-pack marks are excellent. We have an app for Surfer Sport. So a lot of the certification programs now that are independent, you can go online and check. And so I think it's the access for consumers. And, I know my daughter uses an app. And so the information flow to consumers, I think, is getting a lot better these days. But you still have to be aware and you still have to be informed. And so, things like these, like getting these podcasts really help reach consumers, I think, and share that information. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning the app and your website to search products and stuff too. Bringing this back to the supplements, like I won't mention the company name, but there is a company that a few years ago, like what was having banned ingredients for sport in a couple of their products. And even if it was just a couple of their products, I, as a dietitian, was never going to recommend that company at all. Right. But 15 years later, they actually have NSF for sport certifications now. And so it's like, okay, company can change. They've changed. They've changed who they're marketing to. They believe, like we said, maybe the culture is shifting about believing in products that are actually good for you. And that's where, again, that, I recently I have the app. So I was recently using the app, and that's where I saw, oh, okay, they're certified now. Okay. So I can trust that and I don't need to badmouth them anymore. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very often, no, not often, I will say at times, having been in this industry, often if a company has an incident, let's say, or has an issue, a turnaround will happen. And that happens in the food safety space. So it can really mark a turning point in an organization. I can't say that unilaterally across the board, but I have definitely seen that in different organizations where it really sparks a significant turn in quality systems or leadership even. So we do see that in industries. And you can know that down the road that organization is a better organization because they learned from their mistakes.
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah. Yes. Can we speak about the food safety piece for a bit and kind of what that entails from your role, Sarah?
Sure. It's very analogous to supplements where there's aspects of food safety which include, sanitary manufacturing. When you're at a production site, whether that's a food manufacturing plant, whether that's a farm or a processing facility, you need to have, well-trained employees. You need to have hygienic facilities. You need to be cleaning. So these are, basic principles of food hygiene that help protect us from pathogens. So, similar principles hold true in supplements as hold true in food. Supplements even go, further in their requirements. There's things like controlling your ingredients and raw materials, knowing, what your suppliers are sending you, having records, good record keeping, making sure that you're testing your incoming raw materials or your incoming packaging and food ingredients So these are all things that consumers, when you pick a product off the shelf and you put it in your cart, you need to know that the company that prepared the finished product really had control over their manufacturing environment, their incoming raw materials, and their packaging, because the supply chain can be quite long and things can
Yeah.
get lost along the way. So it's really about food safety, or any product safety is very often about good communication and good controls along the supply chain, so that by the time it gets to you on the shelf or lands at your doorstep, if you're, doing a direct,
Online shopping. Yep.
like many of us do today, that that someone's in control of that
Mm-hmm.
process, and it's direct line of sight all the way back to the origins of those ingredients. So that is where we play a role, is ensuring that connectivity and that those checks are actually happening, because
Yeah.
something dangerous can come into play at any one of many, many steps. So that's why our role is so important. That's why we have thousands of technical auditors and scientists and experts around the world checking and verifying all of those points of origin. It's part of what we do.
Yeah, and I'm just paralleling that with my experience as a dietitian, where I've been doing my own thing, my own online practice for many years now. But early in my career, like when I worked at a hospital, part of my role, I was working with the patients, but it was also getting the food deliveries into the kitchen, right? And there's checkpoints in there. It's like, we're not going to take a food off of that truck if it's not at the right temperature, or if a date is expired, right? And then, okay, then we hold the food, then we cook it, and then we test it again before we send it out to a patient. I mean, and those are all those checkpoints. And so you're just saying that, but now we're talking from raw material to doorstep, or raw material to plate. So all those there's checkpoints all along the way that are needed to ensure food safety. It's a huge undertaking. But if you break it up into those little chunks, then you can see everybody has their role and responsibility in it.
I think the key is when there's certain stressors in the supply chain. So John and I have been living this the last, several months, as you have stressors in the supply chain, for instance, tariffs or other kinds of our companies, our clients, our manufacturers, they have to pivot. And so we need to be there to help them. If they need to reformulate, then we need to be retesting their products. Or if they need to be shipping and changing suppliers, we need to be ready to help them test or adjust their labels. So making sure that we're always ready to support them with testing, ongoing certification, because the companies have to be agile when those supply chains are stressed for many different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there. So one of the things when chains get stressed, one thing that happens is it opens the door for people who have nefarious deeds in mind of adulterating product. So adulteration can be as simple as substituting in cornstarch a little bit to increase your profit. It can be as detrimental health as a complete substitution of an ingredient with something that is dangerous to a human to consume. So that's when a lot of times that's when that happens. So that's when I would caution, when we caution brands too. It's like, hey, I mean, this is a hot ingredient. It's like, I think back to Hudia Gordonii that was occurring. I don't know how many years. I'm old, so it's probably like 10, 15 years ago now. But anyway, it's like it was the next ingredient coming out. Dr. Oz talked about it. Oprah talked about it. And when you look at it at face value, it was an ingredient that was coming out of South Africa. That's where the plant grew. It's like, wow, all these supplement manufacturers, all these brands are putting it in there. There's no way that amount of ingredients coming out of Africa and then putting it here. And a colleague of mine did an expose on that. And sure enough, it was many of the products didn't have an ounce of that. Some were, in fact, sawdust. So you got to be aware. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Not harmful to human health, but just not worth your money.
Right. Yeah, oh my gosh. Even as a dietitian, there's so many food ingredients that I don't even know what that is, right? Because it's from somewhere else, not in the US, something I didn't grow up with eating or something, or some extract from a plant I've never even heard of. Right? And it's funny how things just like what's one? I don't know if this is in any supplements per se, but I'm seeing it in food products all the time now is allulose as a sugar
Mhm.
substitute. Like it's a non-nutritive natural sweetener.
Yeah.
And this came on my radar just like three years ago. And I'm like, I don't even know what allulose is. I still kind of don't. It's been 3 years and I'm still like, I don't really know what it is. It's in a lot of yogurts now. Have you guys heard of it?
I have.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't come across it. This is John's area of these ingredients. I'm gonna let
We're sitting
him
here talking.
comment on this one.
Sitting here talking. So what I do, I'm a nerd. I go on PubChem and look up the structure of it. Sorry.
Yeah. I love that. You don't Google it. You go on a
Yeah. So no,
chemistry.
I don't use Google like that. I go to the scientific shows. I mean, I use Google Scholar. I
Yeah.
use places like PubChem if I have a
Naturally.
specific compound because I mean, if I look on PubChem, it talks about how it's made, it talks about the patents. There's even a category on toxicity, so it has a wealth of
Right.
information on there. So
Yeah.
I use that as my initial research for thing. Yeah, it's like a sugar alcohol. So it's
Yeah.
non-nutritive. So think of mannitol, different sweeteners like that. So it does have no caloric value, but just a quick blush, I would have to go in and read on it. But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
new thing. I mean,
This is an area I want to research more because the amount of sugar substitutes now and I see when I work with clients, I see that anecdotally this is wrecking their guts. Like erythritol, mannitol, they're like, I have terrible diarrhea. And it's like, stop eating this stuff. Stop
yeah,
it. And it's in so much food now because we're living in this world that assumes less sugar is better. And
mhm,
for many people, that is true. And for my athletes, I'm like, get the real whole food, please. It probably for
yeah,
everybody, I would say just have the real whole food. And, we need to monitor real sugar consumption. For my athletes, I'm like, you can keep eating the sugar. You're okay. But this is a big one that and this is why the allulose is of interest to me
got
because
it.
that's new. Like I've been aware of erythritol and mannitol or maltol for a while now, sucralose, aspartame, all those, but it's the allulose that I'm like, where is this one coming from? And it's in my house. It was like one day I was eating yogurt and I'm like, allulose, what am I putting in my body? Right. So anyways, I'm going on a little tangent here, but these are the things that sometimes it's like, yeah, we need, sometimes these things can end up in food products
Mhm.
and we're kind of the ones that are like, wait a second.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
that innovation or maybe that supply chain change. It's hard to know what drove that, right?
Right.
yeah. So and I'll add on that as a sweetener, that is has to be a approved food additive. So it does have to go through toxicological review, and that package has to go before a group of scientists that have expertise in those kinds of reviews to review it by the FDA.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think then this is where the work of dietitians and other health professionals come in. Okay, so this is safe to consume, but how much of this should you be consuming in a day and what is appropriate for your personal health needs, right? What's healthy
Mhm.
for one person might not be for another.
Yeah,
So
and you
that's good.
can't check everything up front, Lindsay. You just can't. I mean, that's why they have vigilance, not vigilance. So when a drug goes out on the market, yeah, it's gone through all this safety review and they've gone
But
through
it
the
can still
clinicals,
be
phase 1, 2,
recalled.
3. Sometimes you don't catch anything until it's out to an enormous population. Think Celecox. When the COX-2 inhibitors, the second generation COX inhibitors of
Oh,
pain relief came out, Vioxx. I think it's Vioxx is the one I'm thinking of. But yeah, and they didn't recognize until a lot of people started taking it the increased risk of cardiovascular death. So sometimes it
mhm.
takes a greater population of exposure to uncover these kinds of deleterious effects.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, that's a risk we all take in order to innovate. It's
Yeah.
a risk we take. Yeah. In order to solve a problem, sometimes,
Well,
you know, we create new problems, but
yeah, and then it's risk benefit too. You're
risk
evaluating the benefits versus the risk. So is the benefit worth that risk? In some cases, the benefit is. And that's why we have a whole pharmaceutical market because people are really need those things.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with the time we have left, I wanted to dive into one more ingredient just because I feel like and it was a couple months ago now, but in October, in my world of nutrition and sports nutrition and supplements like protein powders, people got quite freaked out about a headline about lead in your protein powders. And this was when I saw the headline, I thought to myself, didn't we already know this? Because this has kind of come up before, but of course, not everybody is in my career field to where they're keeping up with this stuff. But, what I was aware of was that some plant-based protein powders had more lead in it because of the nature of it being a plant-based protein powder. That was really what I was aware of. But I think people got a little like when they read that headline, lead in your protein powder, they immediately think an issue with the supply chain or that we're adding lead, like people have malicious intent to add lead or something like that. And ultimately, too, when I dove into that headline, it's Consumer Reports that did it, and I don't mind them as a company independently testing. I don't mind them doing that. I think that's a cool thing to do, but their levels of testing seemed very extreme for the lead amounts. But I just thought, well, having you two on here, if you wanted to share your thoughts on that headline or what you think about lead in protein products. I know, John, that's something NSF for Sport tests for. You have a upper limit for lead, and all your products that have your certification are under that limit.
Yeah. So our exposure level within the contents tested is less than 10 micrograms a day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we recognize it. And that was set by, we took it from some of the public health setting bodies, and it's reviewed by toxicologists. So that's what it is. And, I think that folks need to understand. So lead is, it's in the soil.
Yeah. We're
And think
exposed to it.
it's in the earth crust. And think back to the early 70s. What was in gas?
I
Tetraethyl
don't know.
lead. So
Okay.
so tetraethyl lead, it was a lot of gasoline. So,
Wow.
so for the longest time, it's a good anti-knock agent. It boosts the octane of gas, but hey, it's toxic to human beings. So
Mhm.
let's put it in gasoline. I'm adjusting there, but there was a good reason for it, but they just didn't realize that, when we burn it, it releases lead oxide into the environment,
Yeah.
and the wind blows, the atmosphere moves it around, and it gets deposited in areas that are off the roadways, and then gets uptaken by plants. Just what we're talking about here.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point. We're not trying to freak people out, but it's like it is around us. So you wanna minimize your exposure, but again, just going back to supplements, like, okay, there's organizations in place that are limiting that. And I think as the dietitian, it comes back to, like, how many scoops of protein powder are you taking a day? Right? Because, on the
Yeah.
package, it might say use one scoop per day. Are you using 3? Let's get some chicken in you. Let's get some yogurt in you, or let's get more just regular beans instead of this concentrated powder.
Yeah.
Let's get tofu for your protein in. That's where I see my role as a dietitian is I see the value of supplements. I use supplements in my own life. I recommend them for my clients, but not at the expense of a good solid whole foods diet. And so again, kind of going back to the turmeric thing that I brought up before, it's like, I think turmeric's great, but are people overdoing it? Even if this is a good product, you as the consumer can overdo it. So pay attention to the labels, to the certifications, and use as recommended.
Yeah,
More is not always better.
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and then that's why we call them supplements, right? To supplement a diet so that it helps you, fill in gaps, but it's not a diet in and of itself, which is exactly what you're saying. And I think, you hit the nail on the head, which is that sometimes there are headlines. And this is the unfortunate thing is that topics like lead can be scary and the science behind them can be a little bit hard to understand. But there is, when NSF develops a guideline for products like this, to simplify it and distill it down, we use the best thresholds out there on an international basis to set limits and criteria for the products that we certify. And we develop test methods with the most consistency. So again, that the products that we test, whether it's the first one or the millionth one, that they test consistently. So I think it always comes back to using the best science that we have. I think it's hard to explain all of that in a headline, but
Right.
saying we found lead is packs a bigger punch, even if
Oh, yes.
there's a lot more to that story. So, you know, but just like you said, a well-rounded diet is always the best answer. And, consumers have to take a few minutes to educate themselves on, where these thresholds come from and how they're set and what's really the right threshold. But there's a lot of elements that are naturally occurring and come from different sources. And I think what's that saying, John, for toxicologists? It's not the substance, it's the dose or something along those lines.
Dose is the poison.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, I've found myself saying that too with and reminding because some of my clients get all hung up about clean eating so often and to an extreme level that can actually become unhealthy, right? Like a disordered level of thinking around clean eating. And I'm the one that's like, do you know you're eating arsenic with your fresh apples? And like not trying to freak them out, but like remember that there's stuff we're exposed to in the world. There's these ingredients and it's the dose that makes the poison to not be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, human species, think of what we've been exposed to over millennia. I mean, and everything. I mean, our species is pretty resilient. Now we do have to pay attention to what we're eating. You're right, and the goal is to minimize things that will harm us. And that, I mean, to bring that back around, that's why we have the certification program. It's really why we do this. I mean, I see no other. I love what I do. I love this. I love coming out and talking and educating consumers about it. And if I was to deliver one message, it's okay, hey, look at the label, look for a certification, and read and learn about what you're eating.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I want to kind of wrap this up by telling consumers, when it comes to a supplement, and you're wearing it on your shirt, actually, that
Mhm.
label says NSF certified for sport. But then also, Sarah, I mean, I've seen just the NSF label on like lots of things, like dishwashers. I don't know, everything. I've
Yeah.
seen them on things
We have
everywhere.
Yes, we have many standards, and we have nsf.org where you can go and you can check for what backs that certification, what it means, whether it's a hygiene certification, whether it's a toxicology certification, whether it's an engineering certification. So NSF is sort of the intel behind, all of the products that consumers touch every single day. So we are on lots and lots of different products out there, making sure that you're safe every single day.
Yeah, and we won't have time to get into this, but I think I'm going to go on the website personally and kind of look at, you mentioned cosmetics is in your wheelhouse. That's been another kind of thing of recent years is like and that people have come to me like, is there gluten in my lotion? I'm like, I don't know. I don't do lotions. I have no clue, but so thinking, the NSF just to trust that like, oh, there's standards in these different products and departments, even if you don't understand exactly what it all means or exactly what they're testing for, you can trust that there's something being done to ensure quality assurance and safety of a do no harm approach. So yeah, that's what I'm going to look into that. So John, Sarah, this was such a great conversation, very educational, definitely makes me, have trust, not just in NSF, but I think the industry as a whole. I think it's been a trend over the past year or two where I think that for better or worse, people are having a lot of conversations about health, especially in America. I think for the better, but there's also been a lot of distrust that's been created. So I appreciate you guys, the scientists, the researchers, people creating standards, coming on, having this open discussion about what you are doing to create safety, quality assurance, and health for people, not just in America, globally. NSF is doing it globally. So thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. It was amazing. Great to chat with you.
Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides, and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.